for another day of worship together. We're going to start out by singing Victory in Jesus. Are you guys excited to be here this morning? We're excited to see you. Sing with us as we start out by singing Victory in Jesus. I heard an old story, how a Savior came from glory, and how He gave His life on Calvary to save a wretch like me. And I heard about His groaning, of His precious blood atoning, and then I repented of my sin and won the victory. Oh, victory, Jesus, my Savior forever. He saw me and bought me with His redeeming blood. And He loved me and I knew Him, and all my love is due Him. And He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. I heard about His healing, of His cleansing power revealing, how He made the lame to walk again and caused the blind to see. And then I cried, dear Jesus, come and heal my broken spirit. And somehow Jesus came and brought to me the victory. Oh, victory, Jesus, my Savior forever. He saw me and bought me with His redeeming blood. He loved me and I knew Him, and all my love is due Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. I heard about a mansion He has built for me in glory, and I've heard about the streets of gold beyond the crystal sea, about the angels singing in that old redemption story. And some sweet day I'll sing out there this song of victory. Oh, victory, Jesus, my Savior forever. He saw me and bought me with His redeeming blood. And He loved me and I knew Him, and all my love is due Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the sing that chorus again, the song of victory. Oh, victory, Jesus, my Savior forever. He saw me and bought me with His redeeming blood. And He loved me and I knew Him, and all my love is due Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. Thank you, guys. You can be seated.
Well, good morning. Welcome. Glad that you are here. Glad that you have come to worship with us this morning. We're going to do something a little bit different this morning. We're going to kind of change things up. I'm really excited about it. We have a couple of guests with us that we were kicking around whether we were going to make this a sermon or whether we're going to make it an interview. And so I think we're going to kind of change a little bit and make it an interview. But I got a really neat story that I want you guys to hear. And we'll fill all that in a little while. But what I want you to do right now is I want to take this time. I'm really enjoying just kind of sitting back a little bit in the last couple of weeks. Just kind of not having that, you ever feel like I was sharing with the guys during the Manor, which by the way we've had some those meetings are fantastic. So if you miss out on them, And I heard the women's worth went good too. But I feel like I'm the type of person that I always feel like I have to react to what's going on. There is, if there's something happening, then there's something that I need to do in light of that. And so I've been recently just trying to sit back and say, okay, God, rather than me doing what I feel like if something needs to be done, how about I'm just going to sit back and I'm just going to wait and then listen for what you have for me to do. I know it sounds like a novel idea, right? I didn't invent it or anything like that. It's just kind of that place that I'm in now where I'm realizing, got to quit pushing and just sit back. And I'm in one of those places recently where I've really, really enjoyed studying and learning and worship right now. And so if you feel like me, that you feel like it's been chaos, it's been a couple of months of just struggle, it's been confusion, it's been overwhelming, it's been underwhelming, it's been all of those things, and I'm tired of all those things happening at once, here's what I want to encourage you to do. Why don't we take the time this morning to just stop for a little while. This is our place. It is our designated time. It's our designated space. It is that what we've set aside as that time that we get to just focus on God. So there is nothing that anyone has to accomplish here this morning. Isn't that great? There's nothing that anyone has to do. There's nothing that anyone needs to be responsible for or anything like that. We're here to worship. So let's do that, all right? So I want to challenge you just to open up right now just by taking a second and just inviting God into this space, this time that you have as you focus on Him, because we're not gonna learn anything profound. It's not gonna be anything different or anything like that. It's just gonna be laid back, relaxed worship, and then God's gonna speak to our hearts. So if you don't mind, let's stand together. We're gonna pray, and then we're just gonna go right into some more worship, and then I'm really looking forward to the day with you guys, and thank you so much for being here. God, if they are joining us online, I thank you that people have found this time important. I know there's a lot of people that are still waiting before they come back to church, God, and we know that we're looking forward to seeing them, and there's people here that we get to spend time with, God, and I'm loving it. I have absolutely loved being with people and around people again this week, whether it was with the Manor or the Women's Worth or in worship last week. But now, God, in this place, in this time, as it feels like everything has been chaotic and we're just trying to figure out how to be in this world, how to exist, we're reminded, as we saw a couple of weeks ago, that your call to us is to worship you. So you're first, you're chief. We're not waiting on another leader. November will not bring in another leader that will solve any of the problems. There's not a vaccine that's coming that's going to solve all of the problems of the world or anything like that, God. We have you right here, right now. So God, in this moment, in this time, we surrender our hearts and our minds to you. God, will you move and speak to us in whatever way you see fit? We'll respond, and then you'll get all the glory, because we're still following you as the Lord and Savior of our lives. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercies never fail me. In all my days, I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice, 'cause you have led me through the fire and darkest night. You are close like known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now, and I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Sing it again, your goodness is running. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running, it keeps on running after me. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I want to sing of the goodness of God. Lord Jesus, as we come into your presence this morning, God, I think of the conversation that I got to be a part of yesterday with Joey and Kat, and just getting to hear some of their experience. And God, as we were practicing the songs this morning, I was struck at how you have set up this time of worship. God, I was struck that several weeks ago when I planned music for today, you knew what everything that would transpire here, and how perfectly your message is today, God. And I just thank you for that. I thank you for your love. I thank you for adoption. I thank you for redemption. I thank you for your goodness. And God, as we continue worshiping you, that you would just meet with us in this place. And God, may we never, ever fail to give you the glory. Oh, we love you so much. It's your name we pray. Amen.
With my burdens on my shoulder,
about it. She's not enjoying it. That was not anyone's fault. That was some sort of program issue. We're still trying to learn it, but we'll get better, right? No big deal. Man, that was good, right? That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. That was good. I'm going to ask. I have some special guests. You've met them before. You met Joey and his wife, Kat, when they came out. I guess a few months ago now. And they spoke about life choices, or my choice. The center here in Greensburg, or they have one of them here in Greensburg, out of Katanning, and a work that I'm really, really loving, and I love what they do, and I know a lot of you are on the text message list and the email list and all that about that. If you would like to know about that, if you don't have a clue what I'm talking about, I encourage you to talk to Joey before he leaves, because that's part of his job, and why not make him work today? Because he's not here pertaining to his job, right? But I've asked him to come to speak, and we kind of talked about this and how we want to do it. It was going to be where Joey came and preached about a certain something, but I think that it's going to work better if Joey and Kat come and they're going to share their story about something that has happened in the last 2 months in their lives, something that is pretty incredible. And so if you don't mind, why don't you welcome Joey and Kat to the stage. I will let them share as much as they can, and you'll get to know them a little bit better maybe in this. It's going to be, like I said, a little informal, and so you don't have, it's not going to have to be too put together or ordered or anything like that. So let's go with, you need a few extra hands, don't you? And you say, are they going to be able to do this with the kids? That's what the story's about. Just watch, okay? But Joey, why don't you introduce everybody? Start out by introducing everybody, and then Kat, you can introduce yourself. Joey didn't have to introduce you. So.
Well, hello. My name is Joey Vegerano, and
Make sure you stay in the microphone because the live
yes,
feed, yeah.
sorry. And this is Adelina. Can you say hi? Adelina is our firstborn. She is 2.5, and then this is my wonderful wife.
Hi, I'm Kat, and this is Caleb. He's 1.
We also have, so part of the story of what we're up here, we have we're in the process of adopting a 15-year-old boy. We'll call him JoJo. And so we wanted to, basically, how do you talk about this? So Nate you just heard a little bit about what we're doing, and he wanted to ask some questions, and I think the best way to say this is with life choices with my job, we sometimes we'll do, I think about once a year they'll do a what do you call it, basically pouring into their employees, and they'll go to a leadership summit, and where we'll learn different things on how to just basically be better leaders. And this particular one last year was called the Global Leadership Summit. And the whole thing was really great. But personally, I've always worked with teenagers. We've always worked with teenagers as in a youth group or in an outreach kind of way, missions kind of program. But we never really thought about adopting a teenager before. If I'm being honest, that kind of scared everything in me. So, especially with little kids, under 2, just thinking about adopting a teenager that I don't know anything about, it freaked me out. But it was always kind of there, as an option, because I knew there was a need. Well, at this global leadership summit, there was a speaker, and I honestly can't remember his name, and I can't remember everything exactly, but he was talking about adoption in some way. And he and his family fostered many types of kids, different ages. And one story, my kids are just going to talk and have fun. I'm so, it's glorious. He really likes music, so I don't know how expensive this guitar is, but
It's not the church's. It's no big deal.
okay, good. Sweet. But yeah, so this guy basically said this comment that hit me. It was more of a story. And so if you don't mind me kind of sharing the little story that I heard from him, paraphrased. But he basically was saying, you know, they had 2 or 3 foster kids plus their kids in their house. And he said anytime you get a call from the, you know, foster care agency around 5 o'clock on Friday, it's because they are in an emergency and they need to get somebody to watch another kid. And so he got a call at 5 o'clock, and immediately, can you please, we need to have a home for this kid. And the guy thought, okay, well, tell me about this kid, because I already have my own kids here and 3 other foster kids. I need to make sure this is, you know, I want to help, but can I? And the first thing out of the person's mouth was, he's a biter. And the guy said the first thought that came to his mind was, what? He's a biter? There's no way, I can't do this. I got all these kids. Like, what happens if, you know, this happens and then all of them explode and then we're going to try to do it? And then he said the second thought that came to his mind was, what a horrible way to be defined by. You know nothing about this kid, and the first thing you know is I'm a biter. And he said this, he said, what if we all were defined by our worst moment? You want to get down? You can get down. When he said, well, what if we all were defined by our worst moment, I can't tell you what happened. Like, something hit me, and I just couldn't, I don't cry much, but I just uncontrollably couldn't stop. I was watching, and everybody else on my staff was like looking at me like, what's going on? And I just uncontrollably couldn't stop. I was trying to hide it, and I kept listening, and then he started talking about statistics, and I'm not gonna get the statistics completely correct, but I'm gonna get it in the vicinity. He was talking more in England, but he started saying about the homeless population and about the prison population and how many, just the absurd percentage of the homeless population was basically aged out teenagers from the foster care. And then the same thing from the prison population, aged out from the foster care. And it just made me think, like, wow, we have so many problems going on in the world with just people in general and mess inside. Just, I could possibly be, this is all going in my mind while I'm doing this, while I'm sobbering, like, just everywhere, or slobbering, the best way. And so I come out of that meeting, it was a break for lunch, and I called Kat, and I said, I don't know what this means, but we need to look into maybe adopting a teenager. And then, like,
So what? So how old are you, Joey?
I'm 30. I just turned 30.
So you're 30. You see this one story. Why did you think instantly we need to think about adopting a teenager?
I've always worked with teenagers, like, so I have a huge heart for teenagers in that way. But it was after him hearing that guy speak. Like, please don't. There's nothing special about us. Like, we're not up here to try to show you what we're doing. I hope you don't get that. I hope you don't hear that. But one of the things that hit me was when someone on stage said some of these things. And so if I say something or we say something that sparks something in your own heart that God wants to do in your life, awesome. That's more the kind of the goal. But it was, I don't know. Every person in our life was like, you guys are crazy. Because we have 2 kids under 2 at the time, because it was just last year that we thought about this. And then adopting a teenager in general, people just are totally against it. And for good reasons. I'm gonna be honest, the first thought that came to my mind that I couldn't get out of my mind was a teenager. I automatically associated it with, let me just say it so that we can get it out there. I automatically associated teenager from the foster care system bad. And I feel so ashamed to say that, but I should feel a little bad because I was ignorant. I didn't realize it. I didn't realize that these were just kids. I was doing the very thing that I heard. I was listening or hearing all of the worst stories I've ever heard, and I was defining an entire, like, all the teenagers in the foster care by the worst possible things I've ever heard. We do it. We all do it. And for me, I was confronted in my heart, and God spoke to me.
So you heard this person. Here's what's interesting to me, because I want to make sure that everybody gets this picture, and I think there's more in the story later. But you heard this person talking about foster care, and then you thought instantly, we need to adopt a teenager. Now, foster care system and the adoption system seem like, in my mind, being unfamiliar and uninvolved, seem like two separate things. So why do you think that you instantly thought adoption?
I know some people that foster, and they are like the real heroes. Like, don't hear me say that fostering is less than adoption, because it's not. It is unreal to try to take care of somebody else's kids for a certain amount of time, build that bond, and then have to give them up. Like, so please hear that. But for my own heart, when I was specifically just me individually feeling this, was I can't. These teenagers have been looking for a home their whole life. They want this family their whole life. Like, how can, the more and more it wasn't immediately, the more and more I researched stuff, the more and more I got into trainings and different things, it was just this mindset of like, this is what they want. They don't want to be fostered and like left alone. They want somewhere to belong. And I think for me, this is glorious. I love it. I don't know. The specific, we'll get into more details, and I can't really say every detail, but I think I can say this detail. So the specific, our son, 15-year-old, has been in the foster care system since he was 3. She's about to be 3. Like, to wrap my head around her age, and then we're no longer there. Not only that we're no longer there, but almost to the point like, yeah, you're on your own. Like, it's so hard to not get upset about stuff like this. But then you think about it, and some of these adults, it's just been in their life too, abuse and neglect and all of this, and it just keeps wrapping, and it's easy to try to blame people, but I don't know. The answer to that was, I don't really know.
So I want to point to the fact that it wasn't that was what the presentation or anything like that was about. Yeah. That's what you feel God laid on your heart. And so, Kat, I'll give you a chance. You go ahead. You are, if I'm assuming that it's like normal life, you're at home raising the kids. Joey's at this leadership conference, and what we tend to do is that when we go to these leadership conferences, something happens and we get all excited, and then the whole world's going to change, and you don't even realize that your world's changing. So when you get the phone call and then the conversation after that, why don't you talk about that and just what that was like?
My first reaction was no.
Emphasized no.
I didn't have the same experience he had at this conference, and so I wasn't as. Please don't judge the parenting here, guys. I am feeding them chocolate to keep them occupied.
I'm gonna try to change him.
But it's filled with almonds, so that I have to bite them in half, which is why I'm also eating them on stage. So
yeah,
we don't have
to bite them in half. We know that trick, parents.
I mean, on the real, they're big. But anyway, I wasn't really for this whole process, mainly because I was scared of the past trauma that we would have to go through, specifically with teenagers who are, you can't be taken away from your family. It's really hard. And so you go through a lot of trauma, especially when you're a teenager, you're taken away. And so I wasn't really ready for that. Both of my parents have died in the past 5 years, and so I was like, I don't know. I don't think God would tell us to do that. So I said, no, let's pray about it. And I prayed about it for 2 days, and then I said yes. And then God just arranged the rest. We went to visit some kids in our youth group at the Butler big farm show. You guys aren't from Butler, but it's a big deal there. And so we went to visit them, and it was funny because right across the booth was a teenage adoption stand of the people we were visiting, and I was like, well, if I needed any other signs, there it is. And so I'm either hot or cold. I'm either a no or a yes. And so right then it became a yes, and I started discussing how we could do that. But yeah, I don't know why we chose adoption over fostering, other than it just seemed right to not send somebody out of your home after all that trauma.
So you find an adoption agency. Anything in between that story, and I want to point to the story that I've talked to you about, what that process, that room looked like, and that impact. So anything in between that and before you get to that place that you need to fill in.
Yeah, if you ever, if you're like, I think our emotions are good for situations like this, because you get heart tugged to something, and then it's supposed to, like, I think, basically give you some passion to actually start the process, because it has to be an action. You can't just think. The good intention is good, but once you start the process, just take a step at a time, because from then on it was training after training after training, and it started to get hard. It started to get hard, and so we always would come back to, why are we doing this? We haven't even met a kid yet. And it was just like, there's so much to it, because they have to figure out who you are. They have to make sure that you're, they don't know anything about you. So it makes sense. But I would say the process is definitely it sounds very simple and obvious, but it's an action after an action after an action. It's not gonna just happen. Like, you have to keep going back, keep doing the trainings, keep doing this, calling. And I would say that would be the sum of the waiting time there.
And you need to know, as you're hearing this, there are no flyers for adoptions that will come after this, and then everybody gets to make a decision if we're going to go into adoption. That's not what this is. Trust me, we have somewhere that we're going that we want to share. But I want to make sure that you go there emotionally through the whole story. And so one of the ones that really grabbed my heart was when I was talking to Joey, and he explained to me what was it called officially? The matching event. What a matching event was. I had never heard of this, but this scene, Joey or Kat, whichever one, is going to now kind of tell you about this story. This was after all the training. Now you start to move towards an actual child, and so now explain what that was like, and what that room was like, and what that time was like.
So we were just about to be certified as official foster to adoptive parents, and they said, well, you're not certified yet, but why don't you guys come into our matching event? So I said, cool, they like us enough, they think we're gonna go through this. So we came into something we've never been to before. They didn't give us any outline as to how this was gonna go. And so we walked into a room, and there were booths set up around the outside of all the different agencies in Pennsylvania. And each agency had flyers or posters up about different kids that they had available for adoption, I think it was only adoption for this process. So they had that just displayed around, and then in the kind of like in the center of the room, they had all these teenagers who needed to be adopted that they invited to come to the event. And you can.
I think the part of this that hit me the most, I guess I'm a visual person, so you just imagine this room empty, tables around, and the flyers were flyers of themselves. So like, imagine making a flyer of yourself, and then you're saying, because they're there the same way we're there, so we're supposed to, in this matching event, and hear me on this, I don't know how else you would do it. So like, I don't blame the agencies for this. Like, they're trying their best to get adults that want to, adopt teenagers and teenagers in the same room. I don't know how else you would do it. So like this is not a punch on how they do things. It's just a sucky situation. Like I don't know how else to say that or define that. They're in the middle of the room. They have flyers of themselves and flyers of themselves on a table, and you walk in and that's the event. Go make of it what you can make of it. go start and talking with people, and you have to build a connection right then and there. And so Kat and I, we've done. I don't know if you've heard of the Youth for Christ before or Young Life, but it's one of the things you do. It's just this idea as a leader, you go and you pursue teenagers in relationships so that you can love them well and you can hopefully get a chance to share the gospel with them one day. But so we understood going and talking with kids, like we know how to talk with them because it's more just, they're just people. Even though they're teenagers struggling and some of them have attitudes, like they're just people and they want to be loved, they want to be accepted. And so it's just as weird and crazy for them. So I remember asking one of the kids, like, I'm just going to be honest, this is weird for me. I can't imagine what it's like for you. And I remember this kid saying, this is like my 30th event. So now you take that, multiply it like 30 events. You imagine probably 1 through maybe 5, very hopeful, meeting a whole bunch of adults. You're at this 30th event, you come and talk to these adults. Come on, how hopeful are you going to be? Especially because they would say that most adults were so excited in your face, but then nothing ever happened. Because and it makes sense, right? You don't want to. You're trying to build a connection. You're trying to get to know this kid, and then whatever happens, and we fall out. And I think the only reason why I say that is because it multiplies the feeling of what you can think about what they're going through. These teenagers do they have their own imperfections? Absolutely. But there's so many adults in their life, meaning purposefully or not, that have left their life. And then the hard part is now trying to build a connection and say, we're not leaving. It's like, it's going to be like, yeah, right, for a long time, because it's almost like a redemption process of redefining something that has not been shown that way. If that's the best way I can put it. So this matching event was probably by far the most impactful thing in this whole process for me, because I couldn't imagine. How do you even? It just killed me.
It was all books. It was all knowledge before, and now all of a sudden this is, I don't know that everybody. For me personally, that's the emotional connection point. That's where me, who was, if I can say this, if I was as cold as Joey before that leadership conference towards the idea of adoption and that kind of thing, that connection point right there, that's the softening. That's the point that you're like, oh wow, and so you then meet. What did you say we're calling him? Because I got to meet him yesterday. And
JoJo's fine.
JoJo's fine. Okay. I got to meet him on Skype yesterday. Jen and I did. Just a neat kid. And so why don't you start there? You guys met there, and then talk about that process.
So we actually met 7 kids there that I all decided were going to be ours.
She's yes or no. I'm telling you.
And we actually bought a bigger house throughout this process so that we could house all of them. But we met 7 kids, but the person who, they come with work, the kids come with workers, caseworkers? So they had a whole different set of workers. Anyway, every kid has a worker, and we met JoJo, and then his worker pulled us aside. And so one of the biggest heroes in this all working out was his social worker, or whatever she was, pulling us aside and saying, hey, you really need to come meet this kid in particular. And
yeah, can I say, the reason why I think that I would say something to that is the 7 kids kind of thing, I was like, whoa. I'm just trying to figure out my big question was, how do you choose? Because we connected with so many of these kids, and it's just like, how do you choose without like being one of those adults that got someone excited, and then, you know, how do you choose? And so this story about this social worker that took the initiative to come to us and like, you know, do stuff, it really was an awesome thing. So
Yeah, farther?
Yep.
So we met with JoJo, and he was just telling us a lot about his story. And do you remember that specific thing? Can we share that he said? No? Okay, well, we're having a conversation with him. We're getting to know him, and things just started moving pretty quickly. And at the end of the conversation, we were talking about pursuing what this would look like in the future, and it was fast. It was really fast. But we just jumped on board, and I don't know how much to share. I'm sorry.
no, I think right after that, like
Yeah, but first of all, let's fill everybody in. Just so you know, you guys, we're talking, when is this all going on that you're talking about? This is,
so the
like-
global leadership summit was last year about to this time, and then I want to say it was November maybe, where we had this matching event, and then we had the way it goes is you have like or for at least it went for us, we had one meet at home. He comes with his social worker, and it's kind of like this, you know, first time at the home kind of connection, and then from then on, if he wants to, because at this whole point he's a teenager, so he can make a choice to stop at any point. It's not just our decision as adults wanting to adopt, it's also his decision as teenager wanting to be adopted by the specific person wanting to adopt him. So it's like, there's a lot to it. And so all of his workers are his advocate, obviously, you know. So from then it just kept on being like more and more visits overnight, and then it started being, so we just recently, I would say, what was the day? It was like 2 months ago. 2 months ago, where we started 24/7. Like, he's with us constantly, and the way it works is that 6 months at least before you can make the decision to adopt, because they want to make sure that, you know, everything is on the table.
you're 2 months into the 6-month process, you're saying?
Yeah. One thing, sorry, these thoughts keep popping in the head. We talked to one girl, I remember, at the event that said, she said, I was through the process, being about to be adopted, and one thing was said, I guess, that the people didn't like, and they said, never mind. And it's like, that's one of the things that I think that enforced our adopting, you know, if we choose this, because we would say with each other, we would say, if we choose this, we're not backing from it. If we choose it, we got to make sure we really make a choice, count everything, okay? And then when we make the choice, it's like one of our kids. I can't give one of them back. It doesn't work that way, even though I want to sometimes when they're crying. Like, it doesn't. But you, I mean, and you can judge me there, but don't lie. And so, but honestly, though, it's one of those things that's different when you have a momentary emotion, and you make a choice that's permanent. That has chaos attached to it. And so anyways. I don't know.
So tell us a little bit about Joe.
Yeah.
So he's 15. He's had quite a few foster families, above 20. And we did the math on that. It would be over 50 adults in his life who have came and gone just with that. And he is so respectful and kind, unless he's upset. But aren't we all? He loves cop stuff. He is really interested in God. He is one of the most outgoing people. He just loves to encourage other people, especially peers, I would say. He likes working on the farm. We work on a farm. He likes working on there. He likes to bike ride. He's pretty cool. He's tall.
And he's been in your home for 2 months now.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that 2-month process, because we talked about this a little bit last night, but Joey, you're 30 years old, and you have a 3-year-old and then a little baby, and there's a pretty big gap between a 15-year-old and your 3-year-old there. And there's a lot of stages that some people would probably recommend you go through before you get to the teenager, trying to figure out the parenting a teenager thing. And both of us have experience in youth ministry, so we kind of understand that. But in 2 months, is that enough time to know that a teenager is a teenager? I mean, have you had bad experiences in this situation? I know that you obviously would speak to the good, but has there been the bad situations also?
Yes, 1,000%. And I think it is what it is. And I love it because this is why they don't. Those ones look more expensive, buddy. She's like shiny. Sorry. I think teenagers get a bad rap mostly because of their own attitude, and I just when I was a youth leader, and I still am, but when I was just a youth leader and not had a teenager at home, there's almost like I always would say to any kid that I was talking to, you make sure that you're respecting your parents, even if you disagree with what they're saying. If they're not telling you to do something illegal or immoral, just listen. Just do it. Even if you think you don't understand, it's better for you. But now it's just I can totally understand how just in 2 months of him being 24/7, he's an awesome kid, but he's got so much baggage that he puts us on an accident. If we say something, he automatically resorts to what he knows from other adults. And so it's if we don't recognize that, we're going to act emotionally towards something that is not happening, and it's just going to keep being this cycle of us being upset at each other. And so, do you do that? Yes. I think it's an opportunity for us to be an example of going and apologizing if there's something we need to apologize for, because if we are stubborn and don't apologize for something that's obviously needing apologizing for, what are we teaching our kids to do? Because that's what we're teaching.
And you've talked about this a little bit, but how many of you have been around kids, and then the parents, and then the kid does something, and you're like, oh yeah, that's your daddy, and then I'm talking about my kids, obviously, right? But so that when you're dealing with that kid, you're dealing with all of that. Well, imagine, as Joey has shared, imagine 50 different adults that have influenced and been a part of this, and not all examples are good examples. Not all examples are bad examples, but not all examples are good examples. And so you're dealing with all of this, and then on top of that is in the background, the idea that you're in a 6-month period. You're in a 6-month period that this kid gets to make the decision, but not only that, you have to make a decision. And Joey, I know you say that you made that decision before, but how many of us have made decisions before, and then when things get hard, it's just hard to kind of sometimes walk in the decisions that we've decided are going to be reality. So the whole point in all of this is because what Joey has shared with me in all of this is it has made, adoption has always been something that I have had a heart for. Not a heart for as in the sense that I want to adopt or anything like that, because I just can't imagine that level of service and that level of just getting there. But I've always really loved listening to stories and then filling stories. So you have a situation where he's been in 20-something different homes from the time that he was 3 to now 15. And this is the first time he's been in an adoptive situation. I got to meet him. I got to talk to him. He's eating watermelon, sitting on the back porch, and talking about wanting to be a cop, talking about and I said, what is it that you enjoy? What are some of the things that you enjoy that you really love? And you know what his first answer was? Family. That caught me off guard because I wasn't ready for that. But Joey and I have talked about the connection here, and now we want to make the connection. Joey, this has taught you, and it's taught me in this whole process of talking to other people. But it's taught me a lot about the gospel. So why don't you tie all this into what you've learned about God through this? And Kat, I want you to speak a little bit to it also. But what have you guys learned about God in all this?
Yeah, I think if this kind of the reason why. I mean, we're not just trying to. We're not even in your guys' life all the time. So it's not like we're trying to travel and just, hey, look what we're doing. Give us a clap on the back. Like that's obviously not what it is. And so one of the things that I think what we talked about was this has completely changed or just given me more about what the gospel is for myself, for my own mind. Like when I think of adoption, how does it correlate to the gospel? How does that have anything to do with the gospel? It is the gospel. It is 100% the gospel. I had any point, like Jesus came and he died for you and me, but he's not going to make you follow him. So to me, when I got to see we made a choice because we came together and we're making this choice no matter what he says. It was that moment of almost feeling the other side of that. It was like, wow, for God, how sad is it if I don't choose him for him? Like, how sad is it to God? I don't often think about God's emotions because he's so perfect, right? And he's the one that comforts me. But it was this moment of realizing, whoa, he puts himself out on the line. Like, he's going to say yes to us, but he's not going to make me say yes to him. That's crazy. That's where our will comes in. That's where we have an option. We have a choice. And so it's one of those things where I can't tell you how much that is spoke to me because it's vulnerable. I am vulnerable. We are vulnerable right now because we have said yes and we're not going away from that, but he can still say no.
And your desire for him,
my desire,
is that you want him to have the best life. But when someone desires the best life for us on a path, there's that thing you talked about, discipline, and sometimes that discipline sends us away from the person that is disciplining us. We don't. Teenagers that I've realized, they don't really like boundaries much. They don't understand boundaries much, and it's not saying that all teenagers don't, but I think there's been this weird. I'm going to call it a disagreement. Because I think the thought is this, and I think we can understand this. If you put a boundary with me, you must obviously not trust me. That's what is being, communicated to him. But what we're trying to communicate back is no, the boundary has nothing to do with not trusting you. It's just there in case something happens. So, for example, Anley Stanley does a talk on guardrails. And guardrails, they're not there because whoever made them, is expecting us to crash and try to run off the side of the road. That's not why they're made. They're made in case something happens, an accident, and we don't die. The guardrails are set there because for an accident. And so when we're trying, that communication is so hard. When you're trying to love somebody, you don't just give them everything they want. And that you talk about, so many times where we get upset at God because we don't understand situations, and a lot of it makes sense. But for me, that was so perfect. It was just this mindset of, wow, a lot of boundaries that are in my life are the things that he wants me to commands that he wants me to follow. It's not because he's trying to have control over me. He wants good for me. He wants life for me. And whether or not that automatically comes to you or you need something like a visual like that for it to come to you, it's a beautiful revelation of his love for us. He loves us enough to go against our will sometimes and say, listen, I need you to stop being about what you want and be about what I want because I know what's best for you.
And for us to be on the other side of that equation is weird. It's like I'm trying to tell this teenager, you don't understand. Like, I know what's best for you right here. And he's like, but I've seen adults have bad intentions, so I don't know if I can trust you. Both are right. So it's just messy. Whereas now so we have to still keep trusting God and keep being constant in this mindset while God continues to redeem some of his past and reform. So how does the gospel have anything to do with, there was a verse that do you have it up
It's
on
ready. Go ahead,
So
Josh.
it's Romans 5. Romans 5.
There you go. There you go.
Yes, I want to read it. So, what I love about Jesus is that he did not wait for us to say yes to him before he died for us. He actually didn't wait until we were good and making all the good choices before he said yes. It'd be so much easier to go into a group of teenagers and they're all perfect. They always make the right choices, and then say, okay, now I'm willing to say yes to you. That wasn't what Jesus did. He looked at a group of us that were completely messed up because of our choices, because of others' choices, because of everything that's happened in our life, because of doubt, whatever it is. And he said this. You see, just at the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous man, though for a good man someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And I love that. I love that verse, but it's been highlighted for me because we get an opportunity to be on the other side of it. And it's not, like I said, it's not something that we're saying to say, oh, look at what we're doing. We're something that we're saying like, wow, how cool is that? That's us. We were that. We're those kids. We're those teenagers that everybody's like, yeah, I don't know if I would want to do that. And he said, no, I'm dying for you, and I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to do everything for you. You literally don't have to be, I'm not looking for you to do something before you can get salvation. Salvation is something I'm giving you. And then everything else is a byproduct from my relationship with him. And what's so cool is that we're in that process with JoJo. Like, we get to see some of his change by the grace of God in our lives and by the grace of God in his life. And so I don't know where you are in a process of when it comes to knowing Jesus or knowing the gospel, but I just wanted to say, like, hey, if you feel like you're completely worthless, if you feel like you don't deserve anything, it's not up to you whether or not you have worth. Somebody's image is on you. God created you in his own image, and he's the one that defines what worth is. And he says, oh, you're worth it. You're worth it for me. You're not deserving of it. I'm not deserving of the gospel. I don't think anybody can raise their hand and say they are. But I am worth it to him. Because when I say I'm worth it, I'm not saying, ooh, look at me. I'm saying, oh, look at him. He says I'm worth it. That's so amazing to me, and that's the gospel. And I think this process just illuminates it.
Anything to add on that? Okay. We'll bring this to a close like this. Thank you guys so much, and thank you guys. Come on. Here's what we'll do as the praise team gets ready to come up to close out the service. Here's the point. The point is that in this, I want you to see yourself. I want you to look at the story and not see the story of Joey and Kat, the rescuers, or anything like that, but to look at yourself as the person that's been through the system. The system that there has been so many other attempts at your heart, so many other attempts at your life, so many other influences in your life, and you are you can relate to this young man who just feels used in a lot of ways, feels discouraged in a lot of ways, and feels like you would be one of those people that's walled up. Because, sure, God sounds good, but I've had a lot of other little gods that have offered themselves and said that they would do things and have fallen short. So it's kind of nerve-wracking to think about this idea of just being in this time of worship and just realizing that in that all my life, he's been faithful. I've known him as a father, but I've also known him as a friend. And there is nothing better than the knowledge of knowing that God didn't, it wasn't like we were born in the house and then we had no choice but to stay in the house, but that rather that God went outside the house to come and save us because he chose to do that. He loved us that much. It was a passionate pursuit. And in that pursuit, you understand that there is the chance that you will reject him. There's the chance that you would say no after all of the investment, all of the giving, all of the loving. There's the chance that in that 6-month trial period that you could look at God and say, okay, God, all of it was good and I appreciate it, but this one situation makes it a no for me. But yet, knowing that, he still found it worth spending his life for. And that's your story. It's not the story of JoJo only. It's not the story of all those kids and those people out there. That's your story. That's the story of the God that pursued and loved you and adopted you. So let's pray together, if you don't mind standing with me. God, thank you so much for what you teach us in stories. And I know this doesn't feel like what we usually do here at Keystone Church, but God, it definitely feels like the gospel. God, I can't imagine. I can't imagine why you would pursue me. I can't imagine why you would think that sort of sacrifice, that sort of vulnerability, that sort of gamble. That sounds so unbiblical to say in that sense. But God, for you, it wasn't just a process and it wasn't just a decision. It was your life. So God, may we know and understand who you are, but then also be reminded of who we are. Because when we see this story, you get all the glory and the praise because you're a great God. And we love you. It's your name we pray.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. And who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Realize seated as we give you a few announcements.
A couple of things to tell you about that we have nothing to tell you about is how that goes. Because coming up, of course, is 4th of July weekend, and so next Sunday we'll have regular service like we planned. Nothing going on throughout the week. I'm really, really excited because there are a couple of families I know that have said that they are kind of sitting out and waiting, and their return point is next weekend. And so looking forward to seeing some more people coming back, and just be praying for the community. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and commit, if you don't mind, at least this week, to praying for Joey and Kat through this process, and for JoJo in this whole thing, and the rest of the family also. Just keep them in your prayers over the next couple of months. And other than that, though, I don't think there's anything that we necessarily need to talk about. So thank you guys so much for joining us in worship. Go ahead for Hydrate.
Yes. July 8th, we will be having our first Hydrate meeting. It is unfortunately going to go in with the financial peace course, but we are running out of time. It's last minute because we just got permission from GCC to have it, to have Hydrate. So we've got to hurry up and get it planned. So July 8th will be our team leader meeting. July 27th through the 31st is Hydrate. So any kind of help that we can get, we would greatly appreciate, because we're going to need lots of help.
And I want to add to that, to me, the heaviness and the responsibility of Hydrate this year is different. With everything going on, we're cutting our roster back in half, and we're doing everything possible that we can think of. Like, we submitted pages upon pages to GCC of things that we're going to do, but like, I almost feel like we're carrying the weight of the safety of these kids and our staff on our shoulders. So I want to ask you guys to do me a favor. First of all, please cover camp in your prayers. Pray that God will just miraculously keep everybody safe, but also help me pray for wisdom, because there's a team of us that kind of plan, but just pray that God will, if there's ever a point that we need to stop and make a different decision, then pray that we would do that. But just help us pray for wisdom and for safety of the camp this year.
We're going to ask you guys to go ahead and stand with us. We're going to finish out with a song, and then you guys are dismissed. Thank you for joining with us. Thank you for being here for worship. It's like sweet, sweet honey on my lips. It's like the sound of a symphony in my ears. It's like holy water on my skin. Like a dead man walking slave to sin. I want to know about being born again. I need you. Oh God, I need you. So take me to the riverside. Won't you take me under baptized? I need you. Oh God, I need you. Yes, I do. And your forgiveness, it's like sweet, sweet honey on my lips. It's like the sound of a symphony to my ears. It's like holy water on my skin. On my skin. I don't want to abuse your grace, 'cause God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that
'cause God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me wanna change. I don't wanna abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me wanna change. Your forgiveness, it's like sweet, sweet honey on my lips. Yes, it is, and like the sound of a symphony to my ears. It's like holy water. Your forgiveness, oh, it's like sweet, sweet honey on my lips. It's like the sound of a symphony to my ears. Like holy water on my skin. Like holy water on my skin. Oh, it's like holy water. Thank you guys for worshiping with us this morning. You are dismissed. Have a wonderful